Welcome to this lecture on resampling and image enhancement. So this is a quick look at a couple of tools, methods that we use in usually remote sensing. Some of this is applicable to GIS in general as well. We absolutely definitely watch this if you're only interested in GIS, but it does seem more appropriate to remote sensing. What these do, resampling is a way of altering your data, and it will alter the data. That's pretty much unavoidable. Obviously, you do this by creating a new file, but your new file will have changed data. Enhancement can do this. You can export a new file with a so-called enhancement in it, but quite often this is just a method of visualization that's done on the fly when showing an image in whichever software you're using. So resampling, we'll start with that. When might you want to resample? Geolocating, author rectification, for example, transformations data. We're taking a raster image and then transforming it, moving it in some way. And this necessarily involves a resampling. And we'll see why this is the case in the next slide. So if this is our original image, some raster with cells or pixels, however you want to describe them, depending on what the data is. Perhaps we should say pixels because this is remote sensing focused. So here we have our raster, and it's a remote sensing image, so we have perhaps a satellite flying over, and the satellite is not taking into account whatever coordinate system we choose to work in. It's doing its own thing. Similarly, with an aircraft, they're bound by other limitations, and so they're doing their own thing. They're flying according to a coordinate system that is best for them. So if we want to work with this data, we are going to have to work with it together with other information, other data. Then we are going to have to, at some point in our work, transform this, and this will mean resampling. So we go from one coordinate system and we want to resample to another coordinate system. And in this case, we haven't changed the pixel size in this case. All we've done is rotate the grid. That's essentially what we mean by transformation in this case. Obviously, coordinate transformations are more complex than that, but in terms of resampling, the important part here, at least initially, is simply a rotation. We've rotated the grid so that it matches our desired coordinate system. But obviously this means that individual pixels no longer match one-to-one. We can see that in this center pixel here, approximately, they seem to be a fairly good match. But when we look at in other locations, well, what happens to this cell or pixel? Where do we get the information from that one from? Does that translate well over to there? Probably actually it's rather a combination of these four pixels. Because it's inheriting data from all four parts. In previous lectures and in previous courses, I've mentioned the fact that the information within a pixel or a cell in a raster is not located to any specific part of that pixel or cell, but rather exists over the entirety. And we don't know where it comes from. That is just not information that we have access to. So it exists over the whole of the pixel. But let's assume now that we are going to try and move information from the pixels in the original grid into the pixel centers of our new grid. And with nearest neighbor, we don't change the values. We just look for a pixel center that is closest to our new pixel center, and we simply move it over. We say the data that was there is now here. It's a slight shift. We always go for the nearest neighbor, the pixel center that is closest to the one we are interested in creating. And it uses that value unchanged. So we get the values that were in the original image are found in the new image, which means that our statistics are basically unchanged. The values in each cell, in each pixel are unchanged, which means our image analysis won't be affected by that. The statistical distribution is largely unchanged. There will be small changes. We will lose some pixels. We will have doubles of others, perhaps. but that, generally speaking, is the only problem. The other problem with nearest neighbor that we might end up with is this blocky appearance, whereby edges no longer appear smooth, straight, as they should do, but they end up being pixelated due to the way we're transferring the data to the nearest neighbor. It means that the information on the continuous variation that exists in the original image is shifted around and moved, and that gives it this blocky appearance. If we instead use, say, bilinear interpolation, whereby we use the weighted distance to interpolate from several nearby neighbors to our new pixel. We take the nearest several, 4 pixels perhaps, and we interpolate from all of those to our new pixel center. This gives us a very nice looking image. We don't have this blocky problem as much, but all of the original values that we have are lost. So if we were talking about GIS data here, classed discrete data, this is not appropriate. Nearest neighbor is the most appropriate. Whereas for classed data, discrete data, bilinear interpolation will not work. You will by necessity be changing the values, thereby creating non-existent classes somewhere between 2 classes that you actually have in your map and your data. For aerial photographs, for satellite images, also doing this will alter the values in each pixel, and the spectral response may not be correct. If you're then doing some sort of say analysis of the pixels, something even as simple as NDVI, the relationship between the different bands will be altered, will be changed, and you may not get the response you're hoping for. This will also apply to other methods of image classification. So bilinear interpolation affects the actual data in the image, but it looks good. So that can be useful depending on what you're going to be doing with the data. Similarly with cubic convolution, where we can use many more cells, pixels, to create a new interpolated value at the one we're looking for. So this is looking for long-range trends to say what value we're likely to get there, on an assumption that we have fairly linear trends across our data here. And this can be expanded to even more cells, pixels, depending on what we're doing. But again, this changes the values that are actually present in the image, so not appropriate for discrete data, class data, and not really appropriate for image analysis. So both of those methods look good, but do come with some baggage, some problems that is quite important to consider.